Welcome to Around the Weird. Here's your host, the museum curator of the strange and unusual, Mr. Nothing.
Thank you, mysterious voice, and welcome back to Around the Weird, a booktube channel where I talk about all the unusual and out of the ordinary literature that I have found in my travels. Today it is Short Story Tuesday, so let's talk about some exciting short form literature. Today I want to talk about a short story that is about the suburbs and the individuals that reside within it. I am referring to Grass, which comes from Carianne Leung's short story collection, or really just collection of stories, That Time I Loved You, which was published in 2018. For those who don't know, Carianne Leung is a Canadian author who is fairly new. She's only gotten published within the past 10 years, and she's only published 2 books. That Time I Loved You and The Wondrous Woo, which is a longer, more traditional type of novel. She's also a sociologist, which makes a lot of sense given on the topics that she frequently writes about. She's also her Hong Konger. I hesitate to say Chinese when talking about Hong Kong or Taiwan, which certainly won't earn me any points with the Chinese government. Because Hong Kong has been so separated from China, so if I say someone is Chinese because they're from Hong Kong, it doesn't feel accurate. So I'm just going to say Hong Kongian and leave it at that for now. I hadn't known about Carianne before reading this, but now I am very interested in reading more of her work. What's interesting about this is that each story feels kind of independent from the rest, but they are all connected because all of these stories are about people who live in the same suburb. And so, you don't have to read all of them to understand the story. It's not really like that, but they are connected in some way, which I've read in other short story collections. This was a library selection. Don't forget to patronize your local libraries. They might have interesting short story collections like this. So without further ado, let's talk about Grass. I will do a summary, a little bit of analysis, and we will move on from there. So Grass focuses on June and her family, a group of both first-generation Americans and Hong Kong immigrants living in the Ontario suburbs. They seem to be doing pretty well, and they're very happy that they're no longer in the city in cramped apartments, or even back in Hong Kong. Her parents don't really wish to go back to that life. So her parents are very proud and try to teach that to her daughter, how they are in a better place now than they were before. And as the story begins, June talks about 2 suicides that happened in her neighborhood pretty recently during the summer. One that happened, I think, via gun, and the other one happened when the person in question drank bleach or chemicals or something like that. And so the neighborhood is kind of on edge about it, and the children begin making up stories or making observations about whether or not more suicides are going to happen. A little while later, June finds herself displeased to note that her father seems to be developing a friendship with one of her schoolmates, Larry Limbs. Larry is a young boy who is incredibly racist and frequently picks on and bullies June and her first generation friends. But her dad seems to be striking up a friendship. Larry is very interested in learning about the lawnmower and other landscaping type things, and he even offers to mow the lawn, and they seem to have a bit of a positive relationship. However, the lawnmower goes missing one day, and her dad tracks it down to Larry's house. And when he confronts Larry about this, Larry's dad abuses him in front of June's dad. basically forces Larry to give back the lawnmower. And June's dad remarks about this when he gets back home, just noting how Larry's dad is a very rough, unkind man. And then a short while later, June's dad finds Larry trying to steal the lawnmower again, break it apart. And Larry says some racist things before running off. And Larry notes that, or not Larry, but June's dad notes that parts of the lawnmower, including the blades, were stolen. And he's just kind of confused about why all of this had to happen. A short while after this, Mr. Leung, Larry's father, is another one of the deaths that happened in the community. Doesn't appear as if there's any foul play at place, and it also doesn't appear as if it was a suicide. It appears that Larry's dad drank himself to death because he was an alcoholic, and he didn't appear to be too happy. And although people suspect that Larry might have done something, his mother has an alibi for him. Although I don't think Larry's mother is living with her husband, so there's a lot of confusion surrounding that death right there that no one bothers to ever investigate. And as the story ends, the entire family, June's family, is in the backyard, and they merely look at the beauty of the surrounding suburb, and that's where the story ends there. In terms of analysis, there's really only one theme that Carianne is playing with in this story, although we do see other themes in other stories, it's certainly just all built around the idea of suburbia. So Carianne Leung is really exploring many aspects of suburbia in this story. The first thing she really does is compare it to the city. How in the suburbs everything is sprawling, you can own a little bit of land, whereas you probably can't really do that in the city. It's mostly for leasing, and you don't have people kind of all up on you. Whereas if you're in the city, things are kind of cramped because things are mostly apartments. You don't really have houses in the city itself. And you don't. There's a bunch of noise, and it can be quite uncomfortable at times. So June's parents, they really like the suburbs because of how open it feels, because of how maybe it might be reflective of like the American dream that they were promised when they left Hong Kong, and how quite different it is from the apartments that they once had, where everything was cramped and uncomfortable, and maybe it just reminded them of home, and how they didn't really have any of that freedom. But here they seem to have quite a bit of it. And I don't think June reflects on that at all. But her parents talk about it and try to instill that knowledge within her. There's an interesting quote that I would like to read to you from this. They said you couldn't get all this in Hong Kong, where everybody was crammed on top of each other in tiny apartments, and they would sweep their arms to include whatever all this referred to, like showgirls on The Price is Right. There you see a pretty short quote about how the parents are probably constantly comparing things to how things were in Hong Kong, and how things seem to be better, especially given that everything was probably more cramped there, and they didn't really have as much freedom to move about. And in America, or not even America, in Hong Kong or in Ontario, in the suburbs of Ontario, things are quite different and a little more freeing. But despite all this, there does seem to be a loss of community in suburbs, with Carianne Leung saying this is indeed a bad thing. And the example of this is the Larry example, where in the suburbs, Larry is most likely being abused by his father, and nothing is being done about that because probably a lot of people don't know that it's happening. Especially in suburbs, you can't really see what's happening inside the household if people have their blinds shut, and given that the houses are so far apart. But this would be quite different from in the city, where if they were in apartments or something like that, you might hear what's happening next door. You might call social services. There might be more opportunities to see this happening, and someone would most likely try to put a stop to it. So you lose that sense of community. And in addition to that, another idea that Carianne is talking about is sort of the slow death of the suburbs. How in the city there might be more to do, but in the suburbs there's kind of nothing. It's empty. You have to go to the city to really get anything, and being that far away from like civilization, I would say, like there's people in the suburbs, but they're all focusing on themselves, whereas the city there might be other people, other things, and so you really suffer a slow death. And that's exemplified by Larry's father, Larry, who drinks himself to death. And as one of the other characters notes, like, some people die really slowly. It takes them a long time to die because of the circumstances of their lives. Larry's father wasn't happy, and so he drank and drank and drank, and that led to his death. And that might be also a good example of other people in this story who die, other people in this book, in very short stories, because a lot of their life didn't go the way that they wanted, and that mixed with the boredom and ennui that the suburbs might provide. A lot of these people are taking a long time to die. That these suicides were not so sudden, that they had built up, and that they had there was a lot contributing to them that nobody saw. Again, because if you're in the suburbs, you don't really take the time to look at your neighbors. And then related to this again is illusion in the suburbs. So even if people do show you aspects of yourself in the suburbs, it's not really their true selves. Like they're trying to provide the illusion that you're successful, because that's what the suburbs are aimed for. Is that's an American or even a Canadian marker of success, and so in the suburbs, you don't really get the honest view of the world, and maybe you're happy with that, like, because you want that illusion that everything is going all right. And what's interesting about this is when the characters begin killing themselves, killing via suicide. One of the other characters, one of the other neighborhood people notes, I don't get it. Everything was going so well, and and June notes that they're kind of upset, indicating they might be mad about all of this. And maybe that's the case, is because they were under the illusion that the suburbs were a perfect place. But then these suicides reveal that no, there's actually a lot going on underneath the surface, and that the suburbs aren't a utopia. There might be a lot going wrong for them too that they're not taking care of, and so all is not going well. Like you might have deluded yourself with these illusions, but that can't last forever. So I like how Carianne is really working with these themes of suburbia and exploring it in different ways. Anyway, those are my thoughts on Grass by Carianne Leung, a short story that I enjoyed. I definitely recommend that you read it, as well as find or read the other short stories in the collection, because they are all pretty interesting, and because they're interconnected, it tells a wide-scoping story about suburbia and the interconnected relationships that exist there, and also the conflicting emotions and the how we can't really escape from ourselves or from the world just by moving to suburbia. So a lot of interesting stuff that Carianne Leung is working with. I definitely recommend that you go check it out, as I enjoyed it a lot. If you read this before, or you simply want to comment on something I said here, do so below. Let's have a discussion about that. Otherwise, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so that more people can find out about this book and Carianne if they don't already know about her. And until then, I wish you the best of luck in your weird and suburban travels. Farewell.